Hello, this is Sak Chun Bernard. Jesus' disciples must have wondered why he often goes off into the desert or up the mountain to be alone. But they eventually learned that when he does this, he was actually praying, which is talking or communicating with God. They must have come to understand that it is very important, as Jesus prayed often. When we go to scriptures, the Gospel of Luke chapter 11, the disciples saw Jesus praying and asked him to teach them to pray. And he did. He taught them what we call the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father. He even taught them to be persistent to get their prayers answered, to the extent of giving them assurance of receiving an answer from God when they are praying. Assurance is what I want to focus on in this episode, for this will encourage us to pray boldly, making our needs to God. For Jesus said, "Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you." He did not stop there, but continued to pack on his assurance, repeating, "For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks, the door will be open." This is very strong teaching. How much more assurance can we expect from Jesus? When we accept what he says, our faith will be very much strengthened. Well, let me share with you how I prayed during a period of my life struggles. So in the mystery of life, it was all set up when I was about 6 years old, certainly before 8 years old, as my little sister was not born yet. My mother had severe bleeding, perhaps from an uncontrolled menstruation or a miscarriage. All I can remember was that my father was pacing up and down, looking very nervous. Soon he called an ambulance, and then he carried her limp body to the ambulance. It was already late in the day, and seeing the ambulance was a fearful sight for me. I was so little then. My mother was at the hospital for a few days, and when she returned, she appeared healthy. I can imagine she received blood transfusion to regain her health. About 30 years later, she started having signs and symptoms of end-stage liver disease. Putting two and two together, she likely contracted hepatitis C virus from the contaminated blood during transmission. The hardening of the liver at that stage gave rise to increased blood pressure in her portal system, causing her abdomen and legs to swell up. The pressure was so great, the digestive tract from her mouth to her stomach had some ballooning in various places. There were many visits to the gastrointestinal specialist to clamp these balloons up to prevent them from bursting. Also, they had to drain the fluid from her abdomen to reduce the overall pressure in the system and to relieve the tension in the abdomen. With hepatitis C, she became diabetic, and with the increased sugar in the system, she started growing cataracts covering the lens of her eyes, which affected her sight. It was very bad, and she was legally blind. Eventually, her daily activities were severely affected, and our family had to adapt to help her. Some days were very stressful, especially when there were numerous emergencies with visits to the hospitals. Thank God, my younger sister was greatly devoted to caring for her when she was not at work. It was tough on her, as she had little sleep during trying periods. We, the other siblings, would chip in whenever needed. When situations turned critical, there were reactive periods of praying, kind of like knee-jerk situations. I remember begging God for help, certainly applying Jesus' teachings of ask, seek, and knock. In my mind, I was probably pounding on heaven's door. Well, on my part, after many years of struggles with anxiety and emotional pains, my mother finally was ready to be received into the arms of Jesus. I had to fly home on very short notice from San Antonio to Singapore. It takes about a full day to get there, and I finally arrived at the hospital where my mother was in a comatose state. I can tell she knew I was there. So within 2 hours of my arrival, and with my sisters by her bedside, she was relieved of her suffering. She left her physical body, giving us an assuring smile. I still can hear my sisters laughing, and I can picture them in my mind when they saw her smile. Even then, my younger sister struggled with the loss for weeks. And then one day, she suddenly experienced a sense of my mother's presence. This lasted a period of days or weeks. That was very special for her, and it assured her that our mother is all right. As for myself, I can also recall the night I was preparing her eulogy. When I took out a notepad from the drawer, two little cut-out hearts fell out from the notepad. Yes, it was surprising and heartwarming at the same time. My wife had placed the cut-out hearts in a notepad years ago. They just chose to fall out of the notepad at this time. Coincidence? Or is it a God moment? During the days of her wake until her cremation, we did shed some tears, but we were mostly smiling and laughing because God's grace was with us. We were relieved that God had finally ended her sufferings. Certainly ended our sufferings. The moral of the story is that God knows best. Ask, seek, and knock as you may of what you want. God will answer our prayers, but He may not be answering the prayers the way you want it, but He will answer it in such way that He will provide for our needs. The sufferings were difficult, and we certainly had many questions during the trial. But the way of Christ is the way of the cross. Sufferings bring us closer to God. And what God wants is for us to have a stronger relationship with Him, even helping Christ carry His cross. Do you believe that God always answer our prayers? Well, that is what Yeshua, Jesus, taught us. Check out Luke chapter 11. I believe, and I encourage you to read and believe and grow in faith and pray with boldness. God bless.